I do want to welcome Ms. Erica Taylor to the platform tonight. She is the reason why I'm even an ambassador. We met having a conversation like we're having tonight about fibroids. And I am so thankful that you lended your ear to hear me, and that now together we serve on such an incredible, incredible platform where we're able to talk about issues dealing with women's reproductive health, namely that of fibroids and the effects of fibroids and all of the stereotypes that people have about fibroids. We can dispel some of those myths, we can give some answers, and then we can also help give people some resolutions to their issues. But tonight in particular, I think you are one of the only ambassadors who has dealt with infertility as it relates to fibroids. And so I think that this is such a great moment, because I want you to be able to talk and share some of your experiences with dealing with infertility. But first, I want people to know who you are. Aside from being an ambassador, you have been in the entertainment industry for over 20 years as a writer and producer. You hail from Dallas, Texas, where you actually live now. I don't know if you're actually from Dallas, but I know that you're in Dallas, Texas. But also your resume is stellar.
Thank you.
You have worked tirelessly to share stories and information and have conversations about topics that range from A to Z. But you do have a project that is very near to your heart. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. But I think that what makes you so unique and so incredible is how you have been able to journey through all of your oppositions of your health and do everything you do with such class and such excellence. We are honored to have you. I'm so grateful that you again opened up this door for me to be able to have this conversation. You were actually directing and producing the commercials for the USA Fibroid Centers, and you solicited me to come on as the makeup artist. But we had a conversation, and it started off with you talking about your infertility. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how it began with fibroids, when you first found out that you had the fibroids. We're going to walk through, and I want to slow walk this because I want you to be able to tell all of the details that surround infertility and what it means to you. But I want you to kind of just walk those who are here through your journey. When did you find out you had fibroids?
Thank you so much for that introduction, Kim, and hello to all of the fibroid warriors out there and the fertility warriors out there who've tuned in. Thank you so much for joining us. So my fibroid journey began in around 2008. I went to go get fitted for an intrauterine device, which was a new birth control device that was on the market, where they insert it into your uterus and prevent you from getting pregnant. And I did it because I also heard that it helped to control the bleeding from heavy periods. So that was my primary reason for wanting to get the IUD. And so when I went to my gynecologist to get fitted for it, when she tried to insert it, I screamed. And I was just like, is this supposed to hurt like this? This is crazy. And so she tried it again, and I screamed again, and I backed up on the table, and I'm like, okay, I can't do this. This doesn't even feel right, you know? And so she just kind of shook her head and just said, maybe some women just can't wear these, and that's just kind of what this is. Now, my relationship with this physician, granted, she was a sister doctor, so I appreciated that, but she was an obstetrician as well. And so I would always habitually wait for a couple of hours to see her, because she had to run and go deliver a baby before she would have my gynecology appointment. And so every time I had an appointment, everything was always okay. And so, it was very routine. There wasn't anything really out of the ordinary. If I had pain, I talked to her about it. I just kind of expected to see what it was. I didn't think there was anything really out of the ordinary. And but after I just kind of felt in my spirit that something wasn't right, that there was more to the story. And I didn't feel like I was going to get those answers in that particular doctor's office. So I went and got a second opinion. And this was also another African-American female doctor, and she had been kind of more versed in fibroids and issues that involved reproductive health. And so she said, let's go ahead and do an abdominal sonogram. And we did the sonogram and found that I had uterine fibroids. It was something that I had never heard of before. I hadn't talked to any family about it. I didn't know what these things were. I felt very isolated. And so, you know, upon that ultrasound, she said I had maybe 6 or 7 fibroids. And I was just kind of outdone. This was before we Googled everything. And so there wasn't, you know, a quick website to go to get all the information that I needed about what these were, about treatment. And so, you know, that's just kind of where the process started for me. I was in shock, basically.
And I'm sure you were, because you are in media. I mean, you are a person who does the research, you know, and I'm sure you journeyed through that process of trying to figure out the research. I don't think people realize, you know, some people are very much against us having all of this access to the internet, but it does help in some way. I feel like, you know, many of us who found out about our fibroids 10 years ago, or however long it's been, even 5 years ago, we didn't have that readily available access to information where we could even have an inkling of what was happening. So I can only imagine how frustrated you must have been as, you know, an innately, you know, made researcher. Like, this is what you do. You know what I mean? You find the facts, you report them, you put them on a screen. I mean, ultimately, that's the process of a person that works in media. I think that is something that all of us, that innate quality, all of us have that work in media. And I also know that you're an educated woman by trade. You, not that someone who is not, does not do the research, but you had you needed to have that information, and just not knowing that is very I don't know, it just seems unusual, right? Because we don't always, you just assume that people would know, right? It's an assumption that women would know, and they should know. But you would be surprised how many women, even with the information, is what I'm getting to, even with the internet,
and I mean,
still don't know.
I'll tell
Still
you,
have
you know,
no
and
clue.
it's not only was it my job to know information that others don't know and be able to present it to an audience, but this was also information that I expected my doctor to know and to share with me. And there really wasn't much information being shared because there wasn't very much information known about the behavior of fibroids. So there was a whole lot of nail biting and, you know, let's just kind of guess and wait and look and see how they act and see what goes on and how you react. And, you know, when it comes to your health, that's just really not the way you want to go. That just doesn't give you a comprehensive understanding of your diagnosis. So it's like, where do you go from there? You literally are just kind of left to wonder what the next steps are as far as your symptoms, as far as your treatment. And that's really where I was left as well. So being in that space of not knowing was devastating for me. It really was.
Yeah, and you had treatments that were offered to you that I don't know if you knew about either. I read that your doctor wanted you to freeze your cervix, and that you were asked to take Lupron, which I was also asked to take Lupron for a different reason. So now you're faced with these options that you know nothing about. Tell us, after that discovery, what you decided to do, and then what happened as a
Absolutely.
result of it.
So first off, yes, the doctor offered a couple of in-office solutions. The one being the cryosurgery, which means that they freeze my cervix. So they use a solution to freeze the cervix to hopefully slow down the bleeding. Basically, it wasn't really doing anything for the fibroids, but we were now at the point of just trying to control the symptoms. So we did the cryosurgery, and the cryosurgery lasted, I don't know, maybe a couple of months at the most. I want to say maybe like one period. So you know, there really wasn't much effectiveness with that specific treatment at that time. Then she wanted me to try the Lupron shot. And for those who may not know what the Lupron shot is it's a shot that basically makes your body think that you're in menopause. So it's administered, at that time, it was administered every 3 months. And so I got the shot, and my body started to react as if it was in menopause. So we were hoping to slow the bleeding down with that, but really all I got was hot flashes and weight gain. So it really didn't really do much for me either. And I really just didn't like the effects of it on me physically, mentally, anything like that. Then the other solution that we tried was a laparoscopic surgery. So with the laparoscopic surgery, it's a look-see. And so she went in through my navel and went and took a look, and she had told me that she would try to alleviate some issues while she was in there. But the assumption was that this was going to be a quick surgery. I'd be back at work 2 days later at the most, and everything would be okay. Well, we had the laparoscopic surgery, and instead of removing any of the 6 or 7 fibroids that she encountered, she decided to remove my appendix instead. So,
now, what does the appendix have to do with your reproductive organs? Because at this point, and let me just pause for a moment because we are talking about infertility. Was this so that you could have a baby, or was this just to remove the fibroids? Like, what was her thought process of removing the appendix versus, like,
yeah,
I'm
I
just
was
trying to figure
really
that part
stunned at
out.
that point too. But really, Kim, what it was is kind of putting for lack of a better phrase, putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, basically. So what she did was she noticed that I had so much scar tissue that had accumulated from the fibroids that it had tacked down my appendix. So the appendix really wasn't functioning properly. So she felt that she could just go ahead and remove it. And she brought in another physician that removed my appendix at that time. I was not in any immediate danger physically because that was happening, but she just kind of felt while she was in there, why don't we just go ahead and do that? And on one hand, you know, it's nice that she noticed that. It's nice that she wanted to take that initiative. But on the other hand, from a real person's perspective, it made my recovery a lot longer, which I had not budgeted for when it came to work and time. And then also she called in another physician to do that procedure during my surgery. So my hospital bills were increased significantly because of that. So yeah.
So this is back in 2009. Let's fast forward to 2012 when you're in Los Angeles, you're working, business is booming, you're telling all of these great stories, you're doing all this producing, and then you end up in an emergency room. Tell us what happened then. So this 3 years goes by, but your
Absolutely.
body is
So
going
of
through.
course, let me set the stage for you. I had moved to Los Angeles in 2011 to work in film and television. I was working in national radio prior to that. And just a side note, I had a very demanding job in radio. I was working about 7 days a week. With radio, I was always on my feet. I was always moving around, traveling. I was also on the air at that time doing the entertainment news with the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And so my workload was very demanding, and I didn't have time to be in the fetal position at home. And then it also required an appearance. And so I was always in stilettos, always trying to look my best and smile all the time. And when I was going through so much with my fibroids, with the intense pain, the back pain, the bloating, the anemia, all of that, it was very difficult for me to function during that time period. So we're talking between 2009 and the time I moved to Los Angeles in 2011, 2012, that I was just dealing with my fibroid symptoms. Like many women, I was just pushing through the pain. So now I was in Los Angeles and still dealing with the same symptoms, but they had increased. And it was because the number of fibroids that I had increased. And so I found myself worried a couple of periods in a row that I was bleeding so much and the clotting was so heavy that there had to be something more serious going on. And because we have someone who's told us that we have tumors, we're thinking, okay, do I have cancer now? We're thinking, okay, am I about to bleed out somewhere and faint? And then I'm a single woman with no one around. What's about to happen? And so I decided, you know, to go to the emergency room because this was unfamiliar territory to me. And so I went, and the experience was, it was really, disheartening isn't even the word. It was also demeaning. It was also, you know, painful. I had to tell people what was going on with me. And I felt like the people I was telling didn't truly understand the pain that I was experiencing and why I was experiencing this pain. And so they did the ultrasound. Again, this was another time where they did the above belly ultrasound. I still had not yet had a transvaginal ultrasound where they inserted the wand to truly see what was going on. So the sonogram tech, you know, just kept looking at the sonogram and just making these X's on the screen. And I'm just like, okay, what does this mean? What is going on? And they just told me that I had masses on my uterus. And they told me I had masses on my ovaries. And of course, for me, psychologically, I'm like, I have masses. What is that? What are you saying? I have masses. So now I'm like, yeah, okay, now this is cancer. This is crazy. I'm crying on the phone to my mama. You know, it's just putting me in a really bad place mentally and physically and even spiritually at that point. So that's what happened.
And let's just put the icing on the cake, you guys. this is also too with her not having insurance. So you're going through this, you know, for all of this number of years. You're working, you're in pain, you're bleeding, you don't have full support, and then you don't have insurance. What did you do at that point, not having insurance?
Sure.
Where did that put you? Because I know you were probably a freelancer, which a lot of us, you know, we freelance. I tell people all the time when they ask me, you know, as a fibroid survivor, like what made you wait so long? I don't think people understand that when you don't, it was so for us, and I probably can speak for us both. Not only do you not know all of your options, but then you also think, if I don't have insurance to cover this, I'm going to be out of work. And if I'm out of work, that means I don't eat, right? And so we tend to mask and cover and Band-Aid, you know, and bandage up some of those things without the proper medical insurance, which is really shameful because we're working and we're you know, we're giving to society. We're, you know, we're tax paying, you know, tax paying employees, whether we're freelancers or we're working for a corporation, we're still paying taxes. We should have, and that's a whole nother subject for another time, but not having that medical insurance, I can only imagine living in Los Angeles, which is very expensive, you know, what that did to you mentally. If you want to take us through that journey, what decisions you ended up having to make as a result of the lack of insurance, all of the fibroids. I want people to kind of understand like where your head
That's
was
a great
at that
question.
point.
And, you know, we're talking from a real women's perspective. I had moved out to LA and I didn't, you know, I was starting from scratch basically. So I didn't have health insurance at the time. And so, you know, I just suffered in silence basically. And I don't know, I'm sure many of you probably heard the commercials that come on, predominantly the Black radio station, saying that there are clinical trials available for women with uterine fibroids. Call this 800 number. Well, I was at that point. I was at that point where I wanted to call the 800 number because I needed help, you know. And so I called, you know, I said, this sounds promising. I was excited to actually go into, get accepted and go into the clinical trial. And so I went in for my evaluation and it was, oh my gosh, this experience. I went in and into the building. I checked in. They put me in this room that was the size of a broom closet with an exam table and a sonogram machine. And I waited for the doctor to come in. I was kind of, you know, I had so many things running through my head, but ultimately I was like, maybe I'm going to get some relief. And so the doctor came in. It was a male doctor, and he brought in a young woman with him. And this young lady looked like she looked like they had brought her from the grocery store and said, hey, can you just do something real quick for me? And so she looked like a deer in headlights. She looked inexperienced. And
who was this woman? Was she a physician? I mean,
she was the female
was
that was needed in the room for this male doctor to do this transvaginal sonogram. And so, you know, I guess she was a receptionist or someone in the office. And this was at the clinical study in LA at the time. Yes. And so she was standing next to the door in this broom closet of a room, looking scared. And so I'm like, you know, I'm on alert, like, okay, what's really going on? So then the doctor starts doing the exam and he puts in the wand and he moves it around. Granted, this does not feel comfortable at all because he's pushing on fibroids, but he just starts saying, oh, honey, oh my gosh, oh no. I'm hearing this.
You're hearing this.
And I'm like, okay, what is really going on? He said, no one told you? And I'm like, what do you mean no one told me? He said, no one told you how bad this was? I said, what do you mean how bad this was? And all I see him do is just move that wand around, and I start seeing tissue moving on the screen. I didn't really know what I was looking at. He said, oh, honey, you are so bad off. You should have had a hysterectomy years ago. I was like, what? Now, mind you, he's talking to me, and I'm mid-30s, you know, single, no prospects, no kids, wanted to have kids, no anything. And
no
I'm just sitting like, what do you mean? I'm so bad off. I should have had a hysterectomy. You're telling me that I shouldn't even have a uterus right now? And so he just said, yes. He said, there's so many I can't even count anymore. He said, I'm surprised your doctor never told you how bad this was. I said, I actually, I was speechless, Kim. I didn't know what to say. And so I was quiet. I couldn't even ask him any questions.
What an inconsiderate way.
Yeah.
What an inconsiderate way to
Yeah.
reveal something so serious.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
it's life altering, you know, to think all of the dreams that you had as a woman to, you know, have a baby, you know, or perhaps marry a man who wants a baby and you not be able to produce a child. I am so sorry that that's the way you found out. So what happened after that? So he's telling you this is so bad. Does he go on to give you a procedure of some sort, or is he, what happens at that point? And what year is this? So we're still in 2012.
We're in 2013 at this point. Mm-hmm.
Now we're in 2013. So now you've been going through this for 5 years. I'm just giving people a chart so they can understand how long you dealt with this. So now we're on year 5. We're on year 5 of studies and poking and bleeding and wondering and still no solution. Meanwhile, you have how many fibroids at this point? Is it over 20? I think I read at this point 22.
I didn't know how many fibroids I had, but it was over 20. And I, you know, after I got that news, I just basically went to my car and cried, feeling like I had no other alternative. And so that pain in me, you know, went on for a few more months. And it wasn't until January of 2014 that California adopted the Affordable Care Act. And I was able to finally get that healthcare insurance that I needed, and an affordable healthcare insurance at that. And so I was able to find a fertility doctor who was an OBGYN, but she believed in preserving fertility. And so I had an appointment with this doctor, and just in the first appointment, she, you know, I started to feel relieved. She felt like she had been successful with so many women with fibroids, while at the same time, this was still a time where uterine fibroids were still kind of new in discussion in the OBGYN's office. And there weren't a lot of treatments being talked about. And so she, after she gave me a transvaginal sonogram, she did say that I had a number of fibroids. At that point, I think she told me there were 18 that she could see. And so she suggested that I have a myomectomy. But at that time, people weren't really talking about robotic myomectomy. It was abdominal myomectomy, which is a cut larger than a C-section cut across the abdomen to remove the fibroids. So, yeah.
So, no, I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't mean to cut you off. I wanted to talk about your bout with dealing with trying to get pregnant. I know that at some point thereafter, you attempted to get pregnant, and I want you to tell them about your journey with that.
So I'll kind of push fast forward on the story. With that abdominal myomectomy, which is very invasive, I suffered hemorrhaging. I was in intensive care. That process was very invasive. And so I had 22 cuts because she did ultimately find 22 fibroids. I had 22 cuts on my uterus to remove those fibroids, which is the biggest reason why I hemorrhaged in the hospital. And so those 22 cuts had to heal. Those were 22 cuts from my uterus that was supposed to be able to hold a baby. And that's also places where scar tissue can be formed. So, moving forward, beyond that surgery, it took a lot of time to heal from that. And so I lost my job. You know, I had my feet up for a long time, couldn't drive out in Cali by myself. You know, it was a very hard time for me, difficult time for me, but I did get through it with the Lord's help. And so moving forward, I did have.
So you did have the myomectomy. You did have the myomectomy. So you went through this study, which, you know, of course, you found out you had these fibroids. You go through this specialist who you're entrusting with a surgery because you're thinking, if I have this myomectomy and get rid of the fibroids, then I can have a baby. That was, and I didn't want to rush your story. I wanted to kind of get to that point because I think that is very important, that a lot of women that are watching, because this is National Infertility Week, there are so many women who are wondering,
Yeah.
can I have a baby? You know, I'm dealing with these fibroids. Can I conceive? So now you have another hurdle to overcome because you've incurred these scar tissue, these issues with scarring and such from the myomectomy. Now you're out of work. Take us through that process and where you were with after the myomectomy and the scarring and all that you had to
Absolutely.
endure from
So
that
there was a
point.
lot of scarring from the surgery. And so I, spent the next year basically recovering from that very intense surgery that I had. That was 2014. So basically 2014, 2015, 2016, I was healing. I was happy that they had 3 years. I was
Three
happy that they were
years.
able to cut those
3
out.
years. And I don't mean to keep cutting you off, but I want people to see this timeline because Erica, when I read your story, even knowing it, once
Mm-hmm.
I read it, it hit different. I think people don't realize, like for me, I'm a visual learner. So I'm literally looking at your timeline and I'm cringing. I'm tearing, I'm cringing. I always tell Coach Ella,
Mm-hmm.
her story never gets
Yeah.
old to me and yours never gets old to me. Like every time I hear it,
Yeah.
there's something else that I feel like I learned. And I think people need to realize that Erica wasn't just sitting around hoping for the best. Like she was sitting around still doing things to help heal her body, and they weren't working, so I want those of you that are watching me who are, you feel like you're alone, you might feel like you don't have options or answers, but I want you to know that there are people that are out here that are dealing with what you're dealing with, who have dealt with what you've dealt with or dealing with, and you have a community of women who are here to not only share their story, but also to give you some insight of some of the issues that can surround some of these decisions that we make or do not make. And I feel like with the options that you had with, just not having the insurance, to getting the insurance, to finding this woman, I felt like you made smart decisions. You were just a victim of circumstances at this point, and you were, doing the research that you could do based upon the information that you could find, and this is just crazy to me. And that's why I'm so grateful for platforms like this that allow us to have these conversations, because I don't know about you, Erica, but I've never been able to have this conversation in an open space. I mean, we work in an industry where we're kind of at liberty. We can really kind of talk about anything openly, right? And we're not limited to what we can discuss. Like some jobs, you can't discuss that kind of stuff. It's kind of frowned upon. But because we are working in an area that's a little more liberal, we can have these kind of conversations. I still didn't have them. I didn't know anybody with fibroids. We work with a lot of men too, in production. So that could possibly be as well. But I just can't imagine being home recovering and being, because even though you work, on the producer side and the director side, you're still in spaces that require you to be, physically able to move. You're stepping over cords. You're going up and down steps. We're in areas that are not always, we don't work in an office, y'all. Like,
you're traveling.
We in an office, okay? Erica's moving around. She's on sets. She might start her script on her laptop, but now we got to translate that laptop writing to an actual production, which means that you can't just lay in bed and just kind of, work from home. So for 3 years, you're not able to go to
I wasn't
work.
able to work.
You're
I wasn't
recovering.
able to work.
Like I can't imagine what that must have done to you psychologically and spiritually, like you said, and mentally. Erica, you are a champion. Like you have endured this. So we're only halfway through her story, you all. And now we are healing from this myomectomy, and you have all of these fibroids that have been removed. But I also want to talk about some advice that you could give women who are dealing with fibroids and wanting to conceive. Or can we get to the part about conception? Because I want to kind of tell that story too. You get married, you try to have this baby. And what happens?
We were hit with the story of infertility, or the subject of infertility, in 2017. So I had moved back to Dallas to be with my husband, and I was at an OBGYN appointment. He was in the waiting room, and I wanted to get all of my levels checked because I knew, the clock was ticking. So I really wanted to get to, having a baby. And so I got my levels checked. Now, mind you, I had been told that my ovaries were only working at a 2% level after that very invasive surgery that I had, because I also had been suffering from endometriosis on my ovaries, which kind of sucks the life out of your ovaries. So not only did I have, this is
So what year is
this is
this now? So now we're on year what,
this is
8?
2017,
We're on year
so
8.
we're in year 9 now.
We're
Yeah,
in year 9 now,
9
you all.
years.
9 years of
Yeah,
this, y'all.
yeah.
Okay, now we're
So
done.
9
Okay.
years after being diagnosed, uh, so I went to the OBGYN. She did my test levels, the blood work, the anti-Mullerian hormone blood work, the follicle stimulating hormone test, those are two things that women should know and remember. They're AMH and FSH hormone levels. These are things that are tested through blood work. It's a very simple blood test. Just like you would go get a physical, you need to ask for your AMH and your FSH levels so you know where your hormone levels are. They will tell you how effective your ovaries are as far as producing eggs. They won't tell you egg quality, but they will tell you how well your ovaries are producing eggs. So at that point, the doctors had told me before that I was at 2%. Well, here we are in 2017, and I had those blood tests done again. And the doctor says, she looks at the paperwork and she looks at me and she says, Erica, you don't need to have a baby now. You need to have a baby right now. And I'm like, what in the world? I said, hold that thought. I ran and got my husband from the waiting room. I said, okay, can you repeat that? And so she referred us to a fertility specialist who got us on track to try to start getting pregnant at that point. Mind you, again, I work in entertainment. My husband's an entrepreneur, because when we think of fertility and infertility, the first thing we think about is IVF. We think about expensive treatments. And also what we don't think about is that we might be living in a state that may not cover those treatments through insurance, in which I do. I live in Texas, and so those were not covered by insurance. So we started to go see this fertility doctor, and we were seeing him every couple of weeks. We were getting tested. We had treatments done, IUI, all of these things were happening. And yes, you have to pay those things out of pocket in certain states, especially the state where I am in. And so it was really a daunting experience for us to understand that we had such a low chance of getting pregnant at that time. And it was really because of those fibroids and because of, the imbalance of the hormones I had suffered for so many years from fibroids.
This is crazy to me. Like, this is just, so you go through this process. I'm literally, every time I read the story, like, I'm reading it as you're talking again and again and again, because I just can't process fully being a fibroid survivor, all that you have endured. So you all try to have the baby. I want you to talk a little bit about, and if you don't feel comfortable, please let me know. But you did miscarry.
I did. So what happened was, we tried for 2 years, 2017 to 2019. And by the way, I was vegetarian. So I had changed my diet back in 2015 and been vegetarian all that time for health reasons and because of fibroids. And so in 2019, I decided for my New Year's resolution that I was going to go 100% vegan. And so on January 1st, I stopped with the goat cheese, which I loved, and eating eggs, and I went 100% vegan. And I also went soy-free. What people don't really realize is that soy is a big proponent of estrogen in our diet. And estrogen is one of the many hormones that fibroids feeds upon. So if we're constantly feeding our body foods that contain estrogen and, things that we put in our body that are making these fibroids have worse symptoms, that could be exacerbating our issues, right? So on January 1st, I went 100% vegan and soy-free. And then in March, I started bleeding early. And I was like, why? It's not time for my period. What's going on? And I'm like, well, you know what? These fibroids, I know the fibroids had come back a couple years prior. So, I knew that, this could be the reason why. Well, the pain kept becoming more and more intense. And because the pain became more and more intense, I told my husband, I said, I think I'm going to have to go to the emergency room. So about 4 days later, my husband, we lived in an apartment at the time, and I could not walk 4 days into my period. I was in so much pain. So my husband went to our business center in our apartment complex, grabbed one of the rolling chairs, put me in one of the rolling chairs, and rolled my behind all the way to the elevator and to the car, put me in the car, and got me to the emergency room. I was in so much pain. I hadn't been in that much pain before in my whole life. It turns out, Kim, that I was having a miscarriage. Um, I was having my first
Oh my
miscarriage.
goodness. I'm plugging up
No,
my phone, Erica.
oh,
I'm
no
still
problem,
listening to
no
you. I'm
problem.
plugging up my
Yeah,
phone.
no
I don't
problem.
want to lose you.
Yeah, so
Keep talking.
I was having a miscarriage. I didn't even take the time to be sad in that moment, because when I had talked to my OBGYN doctor before, who said I needed to have a baby right now, she told me that I had a 0.1% chance of conceiving. And because I had that 0.1%
Wow.
chance of conceiving, I was, my spirit was low about the whole thing. But now I'm having a miscarriage, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So you're saying I got pregnant? Oh my gosh. So, at this point in time, I want to just point out that I still did not know that there were other treatments available for uterine fibroids. And I had fibroids. My fibroids had come back some years prior. And so I was still in a space where I was dealing with, my fibroids growing. Now I was pregnant, which meant that there was more estrogen being pumped into my body because my HCG levels were rising. For those who are parents, when you get pregnant, your HCG level rises. And so they were causing those fibroids to get bigger. And so the fibroids were also stealing the blood supply away from the fetus. And so I wasn't able to carry. But positively speaking, I was still full of faith now that I was able to get pregnant. So that was my first miscarriage. I want to just, move forward in the story. At that point in time, I decided that because I could not find more information about my condition, about fibroids, and the fact that they were causing this miscarriage, I figured if I didn't know much, other women didn't know much either. Granted, I had already gone public with my fibroid story. So I had women reaching out to me on social media saying, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for opening up. I'm suffering from this too. And that was really important to me. So not only did the combination of these women reaching out to me about going public with my fibroid story in my first film, now I'm like, okay, I'm trying to figure out how can I help? I'm dealing with this, but I know my sisters are dealing with this too. How can I help? And so that's when I decided that not only did I need to speak out, I needed to do something more and use my craft to do that. And that's how I started down the path of making my documentary, Red Alert, The Fight Against Fibroids, which is in production now. So,
and it is such an incredible production, you all. And I have to let you know that it is called Break the Silence, Break the Behavior. This documentary. I feel like it's a movie. I feel like it's a movement. It's something that is so needed. And every time I watch it, Erica, I cry because you have put your blood, sweat, and tears, no pun intended, in this. And it is phenomenal, you guys. You have to go to her YouTube to be able to find this. Now, when they go to YouTube, do they look up Break the Silence, Break the Behavior, or your name, or how can those that are watching see this?
There's two things at play. So the documentary that I'm working on, Red Alert, The Fight Against Fibroids, that is a trailer that is on YouTube, and you can look that up, and that does start to tell the story of my fibroid journey and also the journey of other women who have had very extreme cases, but pretty typical cases of fibroids. That's one thing. And then also with the help of USA Fibroid Centers and Fibroid Fighters, I've been able to utilize the platform Break the Silence, Break the Behavior, which is an online discussion hosted on YouTube where I talk with political leaders, legislators, celebrities, activists who are in that space of reproductive health. And we have some really invigorating conversations about all of that. We just spoke with Calais Stewart. That was posted this week for National Infertility Awareness Week, about her platform about egg freezing and having egg showers, which is like really amazing, and I love that. So we open up that conversation with Calais, and talk about, you know, infertility, especially from a Black woman's perspective. And then also in my documentary that's in production, I talk about my own struggle with infertility more in detail. Also, the miscarriage that we just spoke about, I take women through that. I turned my camera on during that time. I'm suffering pain. I'm being wheeled in the emergency room. I'm crying out to the Lord for help, asking him over and over again to please let, you know, this pregnancy stick. But I'm also recording at the same time because I knew that my story and my experience would help other women that were dealing with this, who were also suffering in silence from these issues.
And how has this affected you and your partner? You're doing all this philanthropic work. You're suffering in silence, but how has this affected your relationship and your partner?
Absolutely. So my husband is my unofficial PR agent, but he's also, you know, my cheerleader, my champion. He is, you know, he's been a stronghold for me when I felt weak. And I'm really thankful that we've endured this journey together and been able to endure this journey together. I mean, he wanted a child too. He wants a child too. He doesn't have any children, and we met later in life, past 40. So this definitely affects him too. I mean, if a man has to put his wife into a business chair with wheels and take her down the hallway to the elevator, having a miscarriage, put her in the car and carry her into the hospital, he is affected. Believe that he is affected by that, you know. And so I'm really thankful that my husband, that I have the type of husband who has been strong when I cannot be strong. But it does affect him as well, because we know that the fibroids are the reason why we've had to endure this. So I want to say that, you know, that first miscarriage, you know, I really felt the need to share my story at that point, but that need only grew as the year went on, because again, in September, I got pregnant again. We weren't even at the point, we were trying, but not trying. And we felt like now we got pregnant again. And oh my gosh, this was an amazing blessing. And so we had our first sonogram, and I'm sharing that as well in my documentary. We were excited. The doctor levels were so high. I flew to St. Louis, and where I'm originally from, and gave my parents a surprise gift to let them know that I was pregnant. And then, you know, came back home, and unfortunately 2 weeks later, we lost the pregnancy. Again, it was because of fibroids. At that point in time, I still had not heard about UFE. I still had not heard about non-invasive treatments for fibroids. Otherwise, that's something that I would have addressed after the first miscarriage, but I didn't want to endure another surgery. So, you know, I really knew at that point that we had to do something. We had to rally the sisters together. We had to bring more awareness to this issue. You know, it was really, at that one was definitely, you know, devastating for me, because that was my rainbow baby. And I knew that that one was going to work out. But, yeah, you know, the pain is still there from that experience. You know, so, you know, it's just, you just keep moving forward.
You keep moving forward. And so now, you know, you get introduced to the uterine fibroid embolization, which we both know, and we'll just share with those that are watching, which is a non-invasive procedure that removes the fibroids non-surgically. And it allows you to be able to be back to your normal self again. Have you had that surgery? Have you had, or are you a candidate for UFE? Because for those that don't know, UFE is uterine fibroid embolization. This is what we promote here at USA Fibroid Centers, but it all depends on size and location of the fibroid. That really determines whether or not you are a candidate. Although we do have a 98% success rate, but the size and location does matter. Has that been an option for you?
I have been told that I'm a candidate for UFE, but you know, honestly, Kim, my second miscarriage was in 2019. In 2020, I still didn't know about UFE. I still had no awareness about UFE because my doctors weren't talking to me about it. They didn't tell me that this was something that was possible yet. And so I went the entire year of 2020, you know, saddened by my miscarriages. And by the way, there's something I want to say about those miscarriages. This is on the reproductive health issue. When I had my miscarriages, both times I was told that my body was already contracting out the tissue from the miscarriages, so I didn't need a DNC, which is a cleaning out of the uterus from scar tissue and everything else.
Mhm.
So both times I had miscarriages, I contracted out tissue for over a week. So if anyone here knows what it's like to have contractions, imagine going through contractions for a week each
For a
time.
week.
It was
That's
traumatic. It was
a
truly
lot.
traumatic. It was,
Very traumatic. I was gonna say it's very, and it's traumatic on the body.
yeah,
That's a lot of trauma
yeah.
to the body. And the body can't
Only so
take
much
for so much
trauma.
trauma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And so I
yeah,
really
yeah,
wanted women to know that, you know, you have to understand your body and your rights and understand the information that you need in these types of situations. So I really wanted to share that. And so moving forward to 2020, later on in 2020, I was able to, what I thought, do something about the fibroids that had come back from the 2014 surgery. And I had another myomectomy. I had a robotic myomectomy this time, and I was told that that was going to be something less invasive than the first myomectomy I had. Well, Kim, what happened was I had that myomectomy. I suffered from a hematoma. So I had a huge bruise on the side of my body that was really painful a day after my surgery. My incision started bleeding because of the hematoma. I had infection. I went back in the hospital for 3 days after that. So now we're talking about the second instance where I had, you know, kind of like a botched experience with an invasive surgery. Still didn't know about UFE. It wasn't until the following year, 2021, where I found USA Fibroid Centers. I talked to them about my journey, that I discovered that there was something called uterine fibroid embolization, a procedure that's been around since the 90s. So no one told me that this is something that I could have had done way back when I was diagnosed in 2008. And I could have probably spared myself all of this pain, a couple of miscarriages, and that I still could have gotten pregnant after UFE. No one told me that. So how
yeah,
disappointed am I?
yeah. Which
Yeah.
is why this is so important. Which is why this conversation is so important. And I want you to really drive home to those that are watching how important it is to share this conversation, because there are a lot of women that are just like you and me who didn't know our options, who went through so much. Coach Ella is on. We have quite a few ambassadors that are on that are supporting this conversation, and how we are so adamant about sharing our experiences so that those that are watching don't have to go through them. I think that, the Bible says something really, really unique. Well, very, to me, helpful. It says you're overcome by the word of your testimony and the blood of the Lamb, right? So people overcome by what they hear you go through and what you've gone through. And I think so that's why it's important for us to share. That's why we talk about, I love you, that your title, that you're breaking the silence. We also have a mantra here that, that we are not going to live, in silence. You don't have to live in silence. We have a few mantras that we say here. And I just got to drive that home to those that are listening, that this is a conversation that needs to be had at the dinner table. This is a conversation that needs to be had over brunch. This is a conversation you need to share on your social media platform, instead of sharing the hottest brunch spot and the cutest shoes in somebody's, or some joke. I think that this is important to share, but sometimes we don't know who to share with. Tell the ladies how they can make an impact in their community. I know you listen, you have been a sacrifice. Listen, you have been the and I keep using the word blood because it's no pun intended, but you are a blood sacrifice.
Yeah.
Like you have been through. I'm glad we can laugh about it now, but there's no other way to put it. I'm a preacher, so you are our sacrifice.
Yeah.
You are our lamb that was sacrificed, okay, in the world of fibroids and infertility, because you have gone through this. Now we're up to year 10, 12. You have been fighting and championing this effort to not only get it well and healthy, but also to help other women. You didn't wait until you got better. You're still getting better, because even though your body might be better, but your mind and your heart is still broken from the miscarriages and from you just trying, and you're a solution woman. You all that don't know Erica, she's a woman of solution. I mean, you see a issue, you come up with a solution. and we're still fighting. We're still
Yeah.
championing. We're still being the cheerleaders of
Yeah.
this because we believe in it, and we believe in victory in this. We believe that there is hope. And so I want you to give the women that are listening who maybe don't have the talent you have to tell the story, you know, with a camera and write a script, but maybe there's other ways that they can tell the story. Are there any tips you
Yeah,
can
I
give
mean,
women?
I think that we need to open up more about what we're dealing with our sisters. You know, we can talk about a man at the drop of a hat. We can talk about dating. We can talk about anything, but we don't talk about what we're dealing with personally, mentally, physically, when it comes to reproductive health. So I think opening up and talking about that is definitely key. Education. You have to reach out. You have to get that information so you can be informed about your treatment options that are open to you, your fertility options that are open to you. There are people out there that provide fertility options at low cost. You know, there are people out there that provide information about how you can increase your chances of fertility, even naturally. And so we want to get that information. We want to be able to educate ourselves about about all of these issues. You know, so you've got to reach out for that information. Don't just sit and suffer in silence. You know, don't just accept your diagnosis or your treatment that the doctor offers. If they don't offer you at least 5, 6 treatments in a row, that's not everything that's available to you. If they don't say the words UFE, that's not, you know, you might want to seek out another opinion, because there are so many non-invasive treatments available, and UFE is one of them. And one of the things I want people to understand too, Kim, is in my research and also talking with the doctors of USA Fibroid Centers, people have the misconception that you can't get pregnant after UFE. And that is one of the biggest misconceptions out there. There is a very high likelihood that you can get pregnant, more so than an invasive surgery after the UFE treatment. Because UFE, as we know, is draining away cutting off the blood supply of the fibroid. And so they're able to shrink the fibroids down to scars. So, you know, for a woman who wants to get pregnant, you're not cutting on the uterus, you're shrinking the actual fibroid so that it's not affecting you as it would have before. So hole that hasn't been cut on. And so people don't realize that that is a huge solution to the infertility problem when you have fibroids. So I really want women to know that information as well.
And I appreciate that. And so with it being so important, why do you think it has fallen off the health agenda? Like, why are we not having more of this conversation on Capitol Hill? Why is this not an option, say, in our medical or our healthcare options, when we get those list of options, or we talk to why is this falling off the agenda? You think
that it's because, you know, women's reproductive health, especially issues where, you know, that disproportionately affect African American women, have taken a back seat to things like COVID-19, cancer, HIV, you know, what's going on with our bodies with women. You know, it's not put out in the forefront. You know, even things like what do you call erectile dysfunction and contraception have taken the front seat above things like fibroids, infertility. You know, and that's something that we have to be more vocal about. We have to know where these legislators stand that we put into office. We have to know where they stand on these issues. We have to know that they're willing to put women's reproductive health on their agenda. And then that's when we need to make those educated decisions about who we put in office, because when we vote and put certain people in office, you have to know how that's really going to affect you once you go into the exam room. You know, once you talk to your doctor, that's a trickle down effect all the way from legislation. So we have to think about those things in those terms, you know. So as patients, you know, you have to think kind of outside the box of when it comes to your reproductive health, as to how many different socioeconomic factors are taken into account for your body. We talk about things like Roe versus Wade, and that gets more conversation than, you know, statistics that are really high in the African American community and in the women's community for reproductive health as well. We don't talk about the disparities that are happening that need that kind of attention, because we're so busy in our political fights. We're not talking about things that are affecting our everyday. that are costing this country billions of dollars in direct and indirect costs. We're not talking about, you know, how we can't get the fertility treatments that we need, you know, that Black women are being affected by more so than white women. We're not talking about those types of things and those statistics, you know. So we have to have those conversations. We have to open up those conversations in different circles that we're in.
Absolutely. And I think that disproportion that we experience in the African American community as it relates to fibroids is one that needs to be addressed, especially because there are over 80% of us that deal with a fibroid. So that right there lets you know, if that large of an amount of women in the African American community are suffering with fibroids, that it should be talked about. It should be researched. We should have solutions. We should have options. And so I am so glad that you mentioned that, and all of those other existing conditions that people are dealing with that have taken the forefront in our community, that we are forced to have to lend our ear to suffering. We're also dealing with some of those effects, with cancer and such, but also, what is the root of a lot of the issues that you have just mentioned. Heart disease is something that you didn't mention, but it's something that affects our community. And one of the things I know that Dr. Yan discovered, being a heart surgeon, or previously being a heart surgeon, is that when he did the study to figure out why are all of these women ending up with fibroids, it goes back, why all these women ended up with heart disease, it went back to the fact that there were many of them who had fibroids. So fibroid could be the root of a lot of these things that you just mentioned, and it should be in the forefront of our legislators in making and developing and having these conversations, but also having some solutions, some readily available, medical solutions for this epidemic, because this is an epidemic. And so I'm glad that you have decided to rally and to cheerlead and spearhead this effort. Congratulations to you, and kudos goes out to you. I want to in this conversation, because we could talk about this for days, because it's just so good. It's just really so good. But I want those that are watching us to know, or who come on later, that this month, or the month of May, which is coming up, that we are offering free screenings, because it's important that women know it's Women's Health Month. And so look, I told my husband, every day is a day. Okay. This is a week that we deal with the National Infertility Week. But then in the month of May, we're dealing with health and mental health. And this affects us mentally. Mental health and awareness is very important, because it does stem, not stem, but it goes back to that. I can only imagine what you are dealing with and what you're carrying. And so many other women as well who want to have children, who are dealing with the effects of having a fibroid. And we want to help you all to be able to have some options. So we do have some free screening opportunities that we are doing, and I'm going to give that information out. I do have the numbers. I need to put it on the screen. I got to put it on the screen. I'm trying to find my notes on these phone numbers, girl, because this is serious. This is serious. And you can actually do some talking while I'm looking for this number, because I don't want to hold people up with these photos or with this information.
No,
I can't find my
phone
number.
One of the things I want to mention too, Kim, is that I want the women to realize that you don't have to wait when it comes to fertility. You don't have to wait until you're in the doctor's office and they're diagnosing you with fibroids or diagnosing you with some other reproductive health issue. Consider egg freezing. Consider freezing your eggs. That is a huge conversation. But we're not talking about it enough. So women, in your 20s, early 30s, you really need to consider freezing your eggs, so that when that time does come around and you decide that you want to be a mother, you want to conceive naturally, then you would have that available to you. You'll have that option available to you. That's not a conversation that I really took seriously, back in 2014 when my doctor was talking to me about it. I thought that wasn't for me. That wasn't something I could afford. I just didn't fall into that category. But I wish that I would have done something about it then. So we really need to consider freezing our eggs. There are options out there. There are more companies out there for you to freeze your eggs with now, so that you will have that option. So when, you know, the guy comes around, or your partner comes around, and you decide to have that conversation, it's not struggle bus trying to get pregnant. So I really want to express that to women,
Yes.
that they really need to consider doing the egg freezing. We have a low shortage of egg donors, African American donors. We have a low shortage of male sperm donors as well. These are other places of activism that people can get involved with when it comes to fertility. So we really need to put all of that stuff on our radar as well.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, because it gave me just enough time to get this number pinned here, but it's because it's a different number than they would call normally, but this is 855-615-2555. If you call 855-615-2555 and let them know you want a free screening. We're doing free screenings through the month of May during Women's Health Month. So this is very important because we're giving women an opportunity. If you heard Erica share her story, she did not have insurance. So the fact that we are offering you an opportunity to be able to get a free screening of your fibroids, where you can find out where your fibroids are, how many fibroids you have, and what your options are. That's very important to know that. And this is one of the things that I love, again, about the community that we work with, Erica, as ambassadors, because I would have never, I wish I knew about the USA Fibroid Centers. And I'm just grateful that there is an option that is non-invasive. There is an option where women can not have to deal with what you dealt with the myomectomy, and what, you know, Coach Ella dealt with her myomectomy, me with a hysterectomy, and not having to deal with all of the long-term effects that come with having an invasive surgery. You do have options here. I love the fact that over 92%, we have an over 92%, I'm gonna get that percentage correct, success rate of UFE, which is the Uterine Fibroid Embolization procedure. So at that time, you can ask all those questions. They'll let you know about your insurance. They'll let you know, what the long-term effects, and those questions can be answered. So this has been such a great, informative, and helpful conversation. Erica, thank you so much for taking this hour out of your night to share your heart and your heart space. Our prayers are with you and your husband as you guys continue to journey. You have been journeying well, and I do know that God is pleased, and we are grateful for you, for your sacrifices and for all the work that you're doing. Congratulations to you. I love you. And for those of you that are watching, thank you so much for watching us tonight. If you have enjoyed this conversation, if you're watching it later, make sure you like, comment, and share this. This could be the best hour of someone's life. This hour that we decided to take out of our schedules can save someone's life, can help someone to produce a life, and perhaps give someone a better life. So I want those of you that are watching, please share this broadcast. Drop it in somebody's inbox. Say, look, I'm going to DM you some stuff, and it is commercial free, and it ain't going to cost you nothing, but I believe that it's going to help you. And that's what we're out to do here at the USA Fibroid Center. So thank you to everybody watching. Good night to everybody. Erica, thank you so much. Thank you to our ambassadors who always, always, always are so supportive. Thank you so much. And everybody have a wonderful evening.
It's been my pleasure.